What is going on? Thank you for tuning into the MMA podcast. Another warm June afternoon to break down some MMA. Pat, what's going down in the deserts of SoCal?
Oh, Jake, it's a beautiful June day out here. No complaints. A little warm, but hey, par for the course out here. Looking forward to a good UFC event this weekend. We got Renato Moicano taking on the Korean Zombie. Very stoked to see the Korean Zombie back in action, Jake.
Yeah, we have seen him. I think he fought late last year, but yeah, he had that huge layoff when he went and did his military service back. That was 2013 to 2017. He had 3.5, almost 4 years off. Beat Dennis Bermudez, lost to Yair Rodriguez, trying to get back in the win column. Always fun to see the Korean Zombie fight. We will get to that UFC Greenville card. That's going to be this Saturday in a minute. Just for a moment, though, we didn't do a show last week, and I really, really briefly want to touch on UFC 238. We're not going to go in depth like we do a lot of times, but that card was a lot of fun. Peter Yan defeating Jimmy Rivera. Pretty one-sided fight there. Tony Ferguson in a fight that we all wish had gone the full 3 rounds, but I think, the way that Tony took the fight back in the second round, I think that Tony was on a pace to win that fight. I'm not mad at Tony getting the W there. It was just an unfortunate circumstance that Donald Cerrone blew his nose, which messed up his sinuses, filled up his eye, and couldn't see out of it. And the doctor rightfully ending that fight after the second round. Valentina Shevchenko, one of the most frightening female mixed martial artists in the cage, and she seems so nice and friendly outside the cage. Just whopping Jessica I with a head kick KO. That it's been a week and 5 days. It wouldn't surprise me if Jessica I was still laid out cold on the mat. That was a brutal head kick KO. And Henry Cejudo becoming the champ in his eyes, because he also has that Olympic gold at 121 pounds, I believe. Defeating Marlon Moraes, becoming the UFC's bantamweight champion, along with their flyweight champion, getting the TKO in the third round. Other notable wins by Tatiana Suarez, Aljamain Sterling, perhaps putting himself in the driver's seat for a shot at the 135-pound strap. The new champion, of course, Henry Cejudo. Your bonuses going to Ferguson, Cerrone, Cejudo, and Shevchenko. It was a fun card. Chicago got their money's worth. Any thoughts on that one?
Oh, yeah, 238 was a big card, top to bottom. Stacked fights. Really enjoyed the whole thing. I mean, the people's main event, Cerrone versus Ferguson, did not disappoint. That was a banger for as long as it lasted. Great scrap. Definitely unfortunate, kind of the late shot by Ferguson there, but not the most egregious that I've seen. It was definitely a great fight while it lasted. Shevchenko, my goodness, huge statement there over Jessica I with that head kick knockout. She's really looking fantastic at 125 pounds. And Henry Cejudo, my goodness, really cementing his legacy, getting that 135-pound undisputed belt, taking out a super tough contender in Marlon Moraes. Man, what else can you say about Henry Cejudo? It's just the champ. Only person in history to have a UFC gold medal and a UFC championship, let alone now he's got 2, 125 pounds, 135 pounds. Hats off to Henry Cejudo. I think, just with that in and of itself, you got to vault him into the talks of one of the greatest to ever do it. And as you mentioned, from Peter Yan getting the W over Jimmy Rivera, Tatiana Suarez getting the W, a lot of big prospects getting some good wins. It was a fantastic night of fights at 238 for sure.
One thing that when I think about Henry Cejudo becoming the champ, we only had 2 fighters do that for the longest time in Randy Couture, who way back in the day earned the heavyweight and light heavyweight straps, albeit not at the same time and Penn holding the lightweight and welterweight straps, also not at the same time. Those were our only double champs. Then, since Conor McGregor held up both straps simultaneously at UFC 205, we've seen George St. Pierre become a champ. We've seen Daniel Cormier hold 2 belts at the same time. We've seen Amanda Nunes hold 2 belts at the same time. And Henry Cejudo now becomes the 7th champ, the 4th to hold both belts simultaneously. And I guess obviously the first of the champs to also have Olympic gold along with it. So yeah, I don't want to say that the whole champ thing is getting cheapened, but it's wild. For the first 204 UFCs, there was only 2, and now in the past 30, we now have 7. So it's something. It's definitely a trend to keep your eye on. Yeah, that was a fun card. A week later, this past Saturday, we had a fun Bellator card. A lot of finishes on that one. Probably the big news story coming out of that one. Chael Sonnen losing, getting finished, and retiring. Retiring for the second time, but this one felt a little bit more genuine. And I feel like this time the Westland Gangster really is all done. Thoughts on that card? I would sit here and get kind of all teary-eyed and nostalgic about Chael hanging up his gloves, but he is so present. He's on Bellator broadcasts, he's on ESPN, he's doing UFCs. That guy's fine. We will see a ton of him. He has podcasts. He is a very, very, very present as far as the media goes. So I'm sure we will be seeing a lot more Chael, but he probably picked a good time to go out after getting TKO'd by Lyoto Machida there on the co-main event at Bellator. Thoughts on that Bellator card? You had Rory McDonald pick up a W, some other results on there as I pull it up. Pat?
Yeah, it was a good Bellator card. Some fun action with Chael Sonnen versus Lyoto Machida. Machida dropping Chael a couple times in their rematch, ultimately getting the TKO there. Landed some really good flying knees. Not a bad move for Chael to step down. I mean, he's got the podcast going full steam ahead. He's on ESPN, I believe, to this day. So he's got a lot going. His profile certainly isn't hurting these days, and I think it seems like he's got enough going on outside the cage where he'll be just fine. Probably about time to call it. I think Chael probably could take out a couple guys who aren't Machida. If he were to get some softballs, some little underhand lobs there, but I know Chael probably doesn't want to go that way. He's going out on a shield. Bless his heart. Rory McDonald, good to see him get a nice W over Neiman Gracie, defend his welterweight title in the Bellator welterweight Grand Prix. Dylan Dennis getting a submission in Bellator. It was a fun card.
And you got to figure Kyoji Horiguchi is persona non grata in the Darian Caldwell household. Caldwell 13-1 up until he went to Risen to face Horiguchi for the Risen Bantamweight Championship, gets subbed out, and then fights Horiguchi again for the Bantamweight, or the Bellator Bantamweight Championship in the USA, and loses again there. So 2 back-to-back losses against Kyoji Horiguchi in Risen and Bellator Championship fights. Was visibly upset after the fight and was cussing out the backstage cameraman, slapping the camera away from him. Not a good look, but I kind of let it slide for a lot of these guys who really their whole lives and careers are on the line every night. A lot of emotion going into that, but yeah, another fun card, Bellator 222. We got another Bellator 223 this weekend, but before we talk about the weekend's cards, we had a couple of bits of news this week to talk about. Notably, not my phone ringing, but notably in the female divisions, we have Jessica Andrade taking on Weili Zhang, and that's going to be the main event for the UFC Fight Night card on August 31st in Shenzhen, China. There were a few nominees for that spot to face Andrade in her first defense. Rose Namajunas being one. I think she's going to take a little bit of time off. Michelle Watterson being another one. She was who I thought was going to get slotted in next, and had been doing a lot of campaigning for herself on both the UFC and other broadcasts and interviews. The other one being Tatiana Suarez, who just recently fought at UFC 238, getting a scrappy win over Nina Ansarov, who I did not mention that fight when we broke it down, but as much as Nina was an underdog and a lot of folks were expecting to lose, which she did lose a decision, that was a incredible third round where she came back and actually took the third against a very, very strong wrestler in Suarez. If that had gone 5 rounds, Nina may have had the momentum to win, and that might be a fight down the road if Tatiana becomes champ that might have a little bit of interest in it. But Weili Zhang getting the nod against Jessica Andrade in Shenzhen, China. She is obviously a Chinese fighter, and the UFC is looking to grow a little bit of support, having a Chinese fighter fight in the main event for UFC Gold. This will be the first time a Chinese fighter has ever fought for a UFC belt. And we also have Valentina Shevchenko taking on one of the 2 women who fought in the UFC's first ever female fight, Liz Carmouche, who debuted women's MMA in the UFC alongside Ronda Rousey. Kind of came out of nowhere with this one, but as to be expected with a 125-pound flyweight division that is still kind of evolving, doesn't have that many fighters yet. There's not really a clear-cut title contender. So I'm not too upset. Liz Carmouche, I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe has fought Valentina Shevchenko in the past and gave her a run for her money. I might completely be talking out of my ass here. I will pull up the record, but, you know, Carmouche is a live dog against anyone. You remember back at 157 when she fought Ronda Rousey. Nobody gave her a chance, but she was real close to a rear naked choke early in that fight. And I'm looking now, yeah, Liz Carmouche does own a victory against Valentina Shevchenko way back in 2010. So Shevchenko, not too many losses on her record. In fact, Liz Carmouche is the only woman not named Amanda Nunes to defeat her. So I have no problems with that booking in my mind either. So we got the strawweight and flyweight title pictures are a little bit more in focus. Pat, what do you think about these 2 August scraps that were scheduled this week?
Oh, I'm very excited for these. I know the UFC may be getting a little bit of heat. Some people not super sold on Weili Zhang getting the opportunity against Jessica Andrade, but Zhang has been looking like a very solid prospect. I've been incredibly surprised with her since she's made her debut in the UFC. I believe on a 3-fight win streak right now in the UFC, and she has just looked very impressive. Seems to have pretty good moves everywhere it goes, standing on the ground as well. So she seems very tough. So I'm really looking forward to this actually. And I mean, hey, the UFC, they're getting to tap into a market with 1 billion plus people. So not a bad business strategy on their part for this one. And I mean, hey, she's willing to sign on the dotted line against Jessica Andrade, who is super scary at 115 pounds at really any weight class. I mean, we saw her have good success at 135 as well. So bless her heart for taking this fight. Jessica Andrade as well, very game for taking this fight in China, in her opponent's territory. Good stuff. Looking forward to that one. And yeah, Shevchenko getting a quick turnaround against Liz Carmouche. Carmouche, super tough. Always one of the toughest outs of any division on a super quiet 2-fight win streak right now. I think she's got one win and one fight in each of the past 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and I mean, she's just a beast everywhere it goes. Definitely grappling more of her strong suit, um, but she can definitely handle the fight anywhere it goes. Shevchenko certainly can be looking to get a W in this one, avenge an L, get on that GSP status, start avenging those L's, and that's definitely one of the ways you get to GOAT status there. So big fight, big stakes for both of these ladies. Looking forward to both of these respective title matchups that have been made.
And some more big stakes on the line. Not really going to go into it today because we have talked about this matchup a lot before. It has been the matchup that was expected, and it was made official the other day via Globo. Robert Whittaker and Israel Adesanya set for UFC 243. That will be October 6th in Melbourne, Australia. Israel Adesanya says he bets anyone that Whittaker will drop out before the fight. So, interesting trash talk already coming from the challenger. I guess there wasn't too much going on. We had a Contender Series Season 3, Week 1 a couple days ago. Dana White being his usual self, being a bit of a fuckhead. One of the five fighters going for a takedown to secure the victory. And Dana, of course, getting mad at the fighters who won't stand and bang and concuss themselves over fighting a actual sound mixed martial arts game plan. But you know what? We could sit here and gripe about Dana all day. Instead, let's look ahead to this weekend. We got a Bellator and UFC going on Saturday. We'll start with the Bellator. Not the biggest card they've put on. This is a London card, but there are some fun fights. James Gallagher, a big favorite over Jeremiah Labiano. Paul Daly, 1-3 in his last 4, a big favorite over Eric Silva, who lost in his Bellator debut, looking to get back in the win column. And you have Gegard Mousasi on an 8-fight winning streak, taking on the Jiu-Jitsu whiz, undefeated in mixed martial arts, Rafael Lovato Jr. And best fight odds sees all of these fights pretty one-sided. Mousasi minus 450, Paul Daly minus 335, and James Gallagher minus 425. So all pretty heavy lines there for the favorites. Thoughts on your Bellator card? I'm not sure exactly. They're calling a part of it Bellator Europe 3 and a part of it Bellator 223, and they're splitting it up all weird in the UK. I know it's going to be on DAZN here in the US. Yeah, thoughts on those fights?
Well, off top, I mean, I got to be most hyped up for Gegard Mousasi versus Rafael Lovato Jr. Mousasi has always been one of my favorite fighters ever since. Ever since you've seen him in every random organization, your Strikeforce, Elite XCs,
Pride, Glory.
I want to say Pride, Glory. I want to say he fought in Dream. I might be manufacturing
Dream,
that memory,
not Glory.
but, Yeah. Although, who knows? I mean, with his striking credentials, I wouldn't have been surprised to see him moonlighting in Glory.
Oh, he could have,
but,
for sure.
I mean, legit. I don't know. I would say his striking is crisp. And Lovato Jr. definitely he is a stud. 8 of his 9 career wins by stoppage. 4 of his 5 Bellator wins. That's gonna be fantastic. I've been waiting for Mousasi to get back in that cage. Very stoked for that. Also, Melvin Manhoof getting back in the Bellator cage. Manhoof, always super fun to fight. Always love watching him. Should be a fun one. Paul Daly, of course, Semtex, always got the explosive hands. I think he's probably a good bet over Silva. I'm not super hyped on Silva myself. Never really have been. I think Semtex is gonna put those explosive powers on display come Saturday in the UK.
And we switch over to the UFC, their first event ever in South Carolina. A lot of guys coming off losses in your top 3 fights, your top billed 6 fighters. Only one of them is coming off a victory. The other 5 coming off losses, looking to get back in the win column, including Renato Moicano, who had a lot of hype behind him before Jose Aldo, but couldn't get the win against Junior, and Chan Sung Jung, who is rebounding off a KO loss against Yair Rodriguez. They headline the card. We also have John Lineker versus Rob Font at bantamweight, Brian Barberena versus Randy Brown at welterweight. That women's flyweight division I talked about, Andrea KGB Lee, she is a big talent there, could be a win or 2 away from a title fight herself. She'll be taking on Montana De La Rosa. Ashley Yoder versus Yuri Kondo, Kevin Holland versus Alessio Di Chirico. That makes up the main card on ESPN Plus. The prelims kick off on ESPN 2 at 4. The main card on ESPN Plus at 7. And I think that Bellator main card kicks off at 9 p.m. on DAZN, all those times Eastern. So we got a full Saturday of fights. Pat, any thoughts on the fights on that Moicano versus Zombie card? Obviously that being the main one, and that being a fight that, going into this week, I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it. Trust me, this is going to be a banger. Both of these guys very skilled. Both of these guys know how to throw down, and I guarantee you my eyes will be on ESPN Plus when Moicano and the Zombie step into the octagon.
Well, one of the fights that immediately pops out at me, Matt Wyman taking on Luis Pena, Violent Bob Ross. Luis Pena, of course, I want to say he was on one of Dana White's Contender Series, something along those lines, and made a name for himself in his UFC debut, I believe it was, getting the W in March. But Matt Wyman, for those of us who remember, former Ultimate Fighter competitor, hasn't fought in the UFC in 4.5, close to 5 years. His last fight was November 2014 against Isaac Valleyflag, and he got the W. 16-7 overall in the UFC. I'm wondering, gosh, what happened with the layoff? I don't seem to recall an official retirement announcement, anything like that. But that one, as far as what's on the prelims, standing out to me, definitely seems to be some good matchmaking overall. Molly Meatball McCann versus Ariana Lipsky. That should be a fun one there. I like old Meatball. She impressed me in her last outing, a victory over Priscilla Cachoeira. And Ashley Yoder, a super tough chick, super tough woman. She has had a lot of split decisions. Really could have gone either way. And I think her fight against Kondo should be a good scrap. Some fun stuff. And as you mentioned, Jake, a lot of in the top 3 build fights on the card. Almost everybody except for Rob Font coming off a loss. How about we bump these ladies up at least into co-main? If you're not going to give them the main event, at least give them a co-main. Andrea KGB Lee, she's on a good winning streak right now. Montana De La Rosa, she's at least got a couple W's in a row. More than can be said for Chan Sung Jung, Hanato Carnero, John Lineker, Brian Barberena, and Randy Brown. Randy Brown, I don't know how he is billed above either of these ladies to begin with. He has 0 notable wins in the UFC, except for beating Mickey Gall, which is almost a 0 on my book. Losing to Nico Price, getting knocked out when you're on top. The guy on the bottom knocked you out, and you're going to be in the 3rd highest build fight on the card against over 2 ladies who actually have winning streaks going on. I don't quite get it myself, but shouts out to Andrea Lee and Montana De La Rosa. Going to be a good scrap there. And I mean, hey, for what it's worth, Brian Barberena versus Randy Brown should be a good scrap, should be a violent one. But that's how it goes in the UFC and in mixed martial arts in general. When you have fighters who maybe aren't necessarily at the top of the game, that's when things get a little more violent. That's when you get the slugfest. That's when it just becomes a battle of heart and a war of attrition, and you get a lot of these finishes. At the top levels of the sport, it's going to be a chess match. I think we're going to see some slugging going on here, at least in the Barberena-Randy Brown fight. Lineker versus Rob Font should be fun, should be very violent there. That is definitely in spite of these guys both coming off, in spite of Lineker coming off of a loss. Both these guys are definitely top talents at bantamweight or 125 pounds. I have no clue actually where this fight is being contested. I'll say bantamweight since John Lineker has been up there for a little bit.
It's bantamweight.
There we go. John Lineker, I mean, definitely top talent at either weight class. Rob Font has consistently been hovering around the top of 135 pounds. Not a bad co-main event there. Should be fun stuff overall.
I was about to say I'm not sure if they're making flyweight fights anymore, but the co-main event on next week's card is actually Jussier Formiga versus Joseph Benavidez. So I'll bite my tongue on that one. Pat showing a little love for the ladies. You know, there are a lot of sports that I just can't watch the female version of, basketball being one. But, you know, there are, you know, soccer is all right. But, you know, really as far as there being, you know, a appeal to watch, I am down just as much to watch a female MMA match than I am a guys match. There really is no drop-off in quality of fight when, you know, you see top level chicks square off. And, you know, I agree with you that KGB perhaps deserve to be on the co-main event of this one. Look at us being social justice warriors here, 2019 on the MMA podcast. And I think because of that, we're going to have to cut ourselves off. We appreciate you listening to us. We will probably be back next week. Like I mentioned, we have another card next week, and that one is going to be a fun one from the Target Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Junior. I just made up a new name for JDS. Junior Dos Santos taking on Francis Ngannou. God, that's going to be a banger. And yeah, a lot more to break down. Recap the fights we just previewed. Pat, anything for the people before we send it out?
Jake, it is nothing but love for the people. Every single day, all the time. Nothing but love for you, my man. Shouts out to the homie Ryan, one of our newest subscribers. Shout out to the team at Heavy Hitters. If you don't know what's up at Heavy Hitters, look into Heavy Hitters. Get up on it. But nothing but love for the people. Let's go. Very excited for this weekend.
Shout out Ryan. And if you didn't know about them Heavy Hitters, they be hitting heavy. We appreciate it. And like always, Pat is on Twitter at Sweet Pappy Jones. You can find us at the MMA Podcast. Somehow we got our greasy little paws on that years ago. And 7 years later, here we are doing the damn thing. We appreciate you. We'll see you next week. And until then, we gone.